So the story takes place when Moses and the Israelites have been wandering in the wilderness for about a year. A year earlier, they had escaped from Egypt, where they had been held in captivity and they had been enslaved. And so they'd been wandering in the wilderness for about a year, and they were now camped out by Mount Sinai. And there Moses was receiving all kinds of commandments and instructions and directives from God. And among those directives were very specific instructions about how to build a tabernacle. And a tabernacle can probably best be described as a portable temple. But now it's important to realize that the temple in Jerusalem had not yet been built. That would be built several years later. But a tabernacle was a portable temple, a place where it was believed that God would dwell and that people would be able to experience God in truly powerful ways. And so Moses was receiving these instructions about how to build this tabernacle and what should be included in it. The Ark of the Covenant, a mercy seat, a place for sacrifices, and so on. And he was also instructed about what kinds of materials to use in the construction of this tabernacle. And so then Moses told all of the skilled artisans among the people that they were to donate their time and their talents in order to construct the tabernacle. And he also told the people that they should donate from their possessions in order to construct this tabernacle. So they were to give silver and gold, fine linens and yarn, acacia wood, and so much more. But what happened was the people just kept giving and giving and giving. And so Moses told them to stop. In your order of worship, you'll find a picture. The instructions in the Bible were so specific that people have been able to do a replica of what that tabernacle would have looked like. I did include a picture of the temple just as comparison. You can see they're somewhat similar in construction, but one is obviously much more permanent than the other. So it's interesting to think about. Those Israelites had been enslaved in Egypt. They had spent the last year wandering in the wilderness. It doesn't seem like they would have had that many possessions to offer. And yet, clearly, they were so inspired, so motivated, that they gave and they gave all that they possibly could. Why? What possibly could have motivated them? Well, I think at the least, it's because they believed in the endeavor. They had a great commitment to the project. They believed in the importance of the creation of a tabernacle where God could be present and they could experience God in new and incredible and powerful ways. They believed so deeply in the endeavor and in the vision of this tabernacle that they just gave and they gave generously. Reverend Stacy Weaver was a student at Candler School of Theology and Emory University, which is in Atlanta, and she now serves a congregational church in Rehoboth. She preached a stewardship sermon on delight in giving, and she talked about learning about a church in the South that had a fairly interesting stewardship Sunday tradition. The tradition was that on Stewardship Sunday, every single member of the church walked down the center aisle of the sanctuary with their tax return in their hands. And then they were met at the front of the sanctuary by a church leader who had a calculator and figured out right then at least 10% of the income. The tax return was returned immediately with an invoice as to what the person was supposed to pay. Interesting approach. Reverend Weaver was from New England. She was a little taken aback by that approach, and it does seem to be slightly lacking in movement of the Spirit and divine inspirational giving. And so she was a little concerned about that and wasn't sure she was going to bring it up to New England. But later on in her career in seminary, she took a class about how to become a nonprofit leader. And as she was taking that class, she was talking to her, again, successful fundraising professor, Dr. Jenkins. And she said to him, I really dislike asking people for money. And he said, well, you know what? I love it. And she very respectfully said to her professor, are you crazy? And he responded this way, and I want to read it so I make sure I get it exactly right. He said, no, I'm not crazy because I never ask for money for something that I don't believe in. I only ask for money for something that I'm extremely passionate about, that I care deeply for. And when that is the case, I'm not simply asking someone for money. I am inviting them to be part of an amazing vision. I think that helps us understand why Moses and those Israelites were so committed to generously giving, because they were committed to the vision. They were committed to the endeavor. They believed in the importance of creating a tabernacle so that they could experience God in their midst. And they could go to that tabernacle and experience God in incredibly powerful ways. They believed in the vision and they gave generously. That can and does happen to us too. We come upon a project, we come upon an endeavor, we come upon a vision, and we so support it. It just brings out in us a commitment, and we want to give and give generously. One of the differences, I think, from the biblical story is that rarely will anybody ever tell us to stop giving when we're giving to a vision. Several years ago now, many years ago actually, our middle school fellowship youth started to walk in Beverly's holiday parade in order to collect canned goods for what was then Beverly Bootstrap's food pantry. At first, the kids would dress up like food items. There's a great picture, which I had hoped to find, but I couldn't find it this week. But Julie is wearing a Prince spaghetti box around her. And Heidi was wearing what, spaghetti sauce or something? Oh, Hawaiian punch. And so they would go along the parade route dressed in their costumes and collect canned goods for Beverly Bootstraps. Some point along the way throughout the years, we changed that, and now there is a float featuring a gigantic macaroni and cheese box that's on a trailer that's hitched to a pickup truck, and then the food as it's collected along the parade route is put into the pickup truck. I'm often on the back of that pickup truck, and sometimes there is so much food given that my feet are buried, and I can't get out of the pickup truck until we get to Bootstraps to unload the truck. And sometimes there's so much food given that the food actually overflows the pickup truck, and we have to find other places to put the food as we're walking along the parade route. But we have never said to someone, no, keep your canned goods. We don't have enough room right now. Now, honestly, when we first started doing this collection, we didn't receive very many donations. But over the years, it caught on. And people understood the vision of those middle schoolers and of Beverly Bootstraps in order to feed people who were hungry. And people have given, and they give generously, because they believe in the vision. You may have heard just a couple of weeks ago that there was another fundraiser for River House and Lifebridge over in Marblehead. And at that fundraiser, Neelan and Priscilla Douglas were being celebrated for their work in supporting Lifebridge and River House, the homeless shelters in this area. At that particular event, Neelan Douglas, who was one of the concert organizers for the concert that we held back in March, the River of Life concert, he was handed checks for $20,000 for this concert that already took place. And I know this will stun you, but Neelan didn't say, oh, keep your money. We already met our goal. No, he took the funds because belief in the vision of providing shelter for people who are homeless and providing that shelter with services. When there's a vision that we can grasp and that we can commit ourselves to, an endeavor, it brings out in us that desire to give and to give generously and to give above and beyond. That's what happened to Moses and those Israelites, and that can happen to us, that we grasp the vision and we give. And sometimes it's because that vision really has to do with not just meeting the needs of an organization that is responding to individuals, but also because it gives us an opportunity to meet individual needs. Some of you may remember the story of Mahatma Gandhi, who was getting onto a train, and as he got onto the train, one of his shoes fell off. And soon as he got onto the train started to lurch, meaning that it was going to take off, so he didn't have a chance to bend down or get off the train in order to get his shoe. And so what he did instead was he threw his other shoe out so that it landed right next to the shoe he had lost. And when his companion said, "What did you do that for?" And he said, "Well, one shoe is probably not going to be all that helpful, but two shoes will meet someone's need to have their feet covered and to be able to walk." There was a story about a minister in New Orleans who was at a convenience store and was second in line behind a young family, mom, dad, and a little boy. And he soon realized that the situation was getting kind of embarrassing for the family, that they didn't have enough money to pay for the groceries that they had selected. And so he said to the family, "You don't need to look back at me. I know this is embarrassing. I don't want you to, look back or see me, but would you please just take this money so that you can have these groceries that you want?" And so the dad and the family took the money and paid for the groceries. Well, it turned out that family was in a terribly desperate situation. The parents had made a suicide pact, and they were also going to take their son's life as well. They had both lost their jobs, they had lost their home, they were living in a car but didn't even have the money to pay for gas for the car in order to get places. And yet somehow, so what they had decided to do was to go to this convenience store and buy their son his favorite treats and let him enjoy those treats before they went forward with their suicide pact and took their son's life as well. But what happened, and the article didn't go into a lot of detail about it, was somehow that act of kindness, that small act of generosity by that minister, turned the situation around for that mom and dad. And they realized that there was hope. So in that just act of a few dollars, it met their desperate need for hope. Doesn't say how things turned around for them, but several years later, the family was visiting churches, deciding they wanted to join a church. And when they entered one church, they realized that was the church where the minister who had given them the money, he was the minister there. And the reason was he was raised in South Africa and had a really distinctive accent from a New Orleans accent. And so after church, they went up to him and explained how his one kind act of generosity had met their incredible need for hope and had turned their life upside down in a positive way. So we're entering our stewardship season here at First Baptist in Beverly. And over the next few years, that'd be long. Over the next few weeks, you're going to hear some stewardship sermons. And as you do that, I invite you to think about the vision of this church. The vision of this church to meet our needs as individuals and to meet the needs of our hurting world, to bring God's love out into the world and to one another. And if that's a vision that you can support, an endeavor that you would like to commit to, then as we approach Pledge Sunday, I invite you to consider a pledge. Not everybody has the funds to do it, but if you are able, I encourage you to think about giving as fully as you can, and I promise you, no one will tell you to stop. So now we have an opportunity to practice that giving. This is a time where we take our morning offering. And on Communion Sundays, the first Sunday of the month, we also typically take the fellowship offering. The fellowship offering is used to help those in our congregation who are struggling with financial stresses or worries. And as we move into the season where people are going to start to struggle to keep their heat on, although supposedly it's going to get cold, but people have a hard time keeping their heat on or meeting their basic needs. I encourage you to give generously to the fellowship offering. We've had a number of recent giving of that offering, and so we need to replenish our funds. So give as you are able this morning.